The Council's ships came without warning. They didn't hover like visitors. They loomed like executioners. Black vessels, scarred with alien sigils, hung above Earth's skies, blocking the sun in some regions and casting whole cities into the kind of shadow that made people whisper prayers they hadn't said in years. The news anchors trembled as they read from the scripts the invaders handed them. By decree of the Galactic Council, Earth has been classified as a Tier 3 subject world. A tribute order has been issued. Compliance is mandatory. What they demanded was simple on paper. Every year, Earth would provide ships full of or technology, food, and even workers. Failure meant annihilation. Humanity wasn't the first to face such an ultimatum. Other species had been broken before. Some bent the knee. Others were erased, their stars burning with the ashes of rebellion. The Council expected obedience. They expected fear. They expected Earth to lower its head like the rest. General Alden Hargrove wasn't built for obedience. He had spent decades in the military, a man hardened by war zones long before humanity ever looked beyond its own planet. His hair was iron gray, his face marked by scars that told their own story. When the Council's order flashed across the military command centers, Hargrove stood silent, his fists curling until his knuckles whitened. His second in command, Colonel Vega, muttered, "Sir, if we refuse, we risk extermination. We're not ready for interstellar war." Hargrove's eyes stayed locked on the glowing words of the alien decree. Subject world tribute. He felt the weight of every insult those words carried. They didn't see humanity as equals, not as rivals, not even as enemies. Just livestock, tools, slaves. "I didn't bury half my generation," Hargrove said slowly, his voice like gravel scraping metal. "Just to hand the rest over like cattle." Vega swallowed hard. "Then what do we tell them?" The Council's representatives arrived in orbit, demanding Earth's official answer. Across the globe, leaders debated endlessly. Politicians choking on fear, corporations calculating profit, religious leaders calling it Judgment Day. But the Council had given a deadline, and it was running out. In the end, it wasn't the President, the UN, or the CEOs who made the decision. It was Hargrove and men like him, men who had fought and bled, who understood that sometimes survival demanded more than submission. It demanded fury. When the time came, the Council's holographic envoy projected itself above Earth's capital. Its form was a mass of shifting tendrils, a shape not meant for human eyes, but the voice was perfectly clear. "Speak your answer. Will you pay tribute as all lesser worlds must?" Billions watched on screens, in streets, in bunkers. Hargrove stepped forward. His boots echoed like thunder in the silence. Every camera, every eye, every trembling heart was fixed on him. He didn't give a speech. He didn't waste words on explanations or negotiations. Humanity didn't have the luxury for politics. He gave them one word. No. The envoy twitched, its alien body spasming as though struck. The word spread like wildfire, carried through every broadcast, every radio, every digital line. No. The silence that followed was heavier than any weapon. For a heartbeat, even the Council's ships seemed to hesitate. Then came the sound, not of war, not yet, but of a billion voices erupting from Earth. Some in terror, some in rage, some in a kind of pride they had forgotten they possessed. The Council had expected compliance. They had not expected defiance. Not from a Tier 3 subject world. Not from creatures they considered beneath notice. In their arrogance, they had forgotten one truth. Humanity had never known how to kneel, and with one word, Earth had just declared war. The envoy's form shimmered in the Capitol Square, its tendrils frozen mid-shift. For the first time, the Council's mouthpiece seemed uncertain. General Hargrove's single syllable had ripped through the universe's order like a gunshot in a cathedral. Billions of humans watched with their breath caught in their throats, waiting for the reply. The silence stretched. Then the envoy's voice darkened, a guttural vibration that made the air itself tremble. "You will regret this defiance. Humanity has spoken blasphemy before the Council. You have chosen extinction." The projection snapped away, leaving only the echo of its words. Inside the command bunker beneath Washington, the air was thick with tension. Officers, analysts, and aides murmured among themselves, half in awe, half in terror. Some looked at Hargrove as though he had just doomed them all. Others looked at him as though he had finally given voice to what they had been too afraid to say. Colonel Vega broke the silence first. "Sir, with all due respect, you may have just signed the death warrant for the entire species." Hargrove turned to him, his expression carved in stone. "Then it's a better death than slavery." Around the room, the staff exchanged glances. Some nodded, grimly agreeing. Others whispered dissent. Humanity had been divided long before the council arrived, by politics, by greed, by ideology. Now those fractures widened. An advisor, a man in a pressed suit who had never worn a uniform in his life, slammed his hand on the table. "You don't speak for Earth, General. The council will annihilate us before the week is out. We could have negotiated. We could have bought time." Hargrove's eyes locked on him, cold and sharp. "Negotiated with a whip at our throat? You don't buy time from slavers. You sell your soul. And I'll be damned if I let Earth trade its dignity for another sunrise." The advisor faltered under his gaze, but the argument was far from over. Across the planet, reactions split like a fault line under pressure. In London, thousands marched in the streets, waving banners with a single word scrawled in bold paint. No. They chanted it until their throats went raw, their voices echoing against ancient stone buildings as though defiance itself had become sacred. In Beijing, the government denounced Hargrove's response, calling it reckless and unilateral. Yet their people flooded the squares, shouting the same word that had already become a banner of pride and rebellion. In Johannesburg, churches filled with frightened families, whispering prayers. In Sao Paulo, bars erupted in drunken celebration, men raising glasses and screaming the word that had defied an empire. But not everyone cheered. In the corridors of power, in corporations and elite enclaves, fear turned to rage. Billionaires who saw their fortunes threatened demanded Hargrove's resignation. Politicians plotted ways to distance themselves from his decision, even as mobs outside their gates cried, "No!" louder than they had ever heard their people speak before. The world was divided. Yet, for the first time in generations, it was divided over the same thing. The council's reply came swiftly. Above Earth's skies, their warships moved into position, blotting out the stars in lines so precise they looked like scars across the heavens. Cities froze as sirens blared. Jets scrambled in futile arcs, pilots straining against fear, knowing their aircraft were gnats against gods. The council's broadcast returned, beamed into every device, every channel, every screen. The same envoy appeared, but now its form seethed with rage, its tendrils writhing like storms. "You have chosen war. Very well. By decree of the Galactic Council, Earth shall face eradication unless it delivers unconditional tribute within 72 hours. Resistance will mean obliteration. Your cities will burn. Your oceans will boil. Your skies will shatter. This is your final warning." The message ended, but the ships remained, their weapons charging, glowing with alien fire. Humanity had 72 hours to either kneel or prepare to fight the most powerful empire the galaxy had ever known. In the war room, Hargrove stood unmoving as the ultimatum replayed on a loop across the screens. Colonel Vega spoke first, his voice rough. "They'll hit us hard, sir. Our satellites, our fleets, everything. We won't last a week." Hargrove finally turned. "Maybe not, but I'd rather go down fighting than teach our children that Earth bows to anyone." He pointed at the screens. "They think we're weak. They've studied our weapons, our wars, our mistakes. But they don't understand us. They don't understand that every time humanity's been cornered, we've bitten back harder than anyone expected." An engineer at the table hesitated before speaking. "Sir, biting back might not be enough. Their ships can level continents. We don't have anything that can match that firepower." Hargrove's gaze hardened. "Then we don't fight on their terms. We fight on ours." The first orders went out. Submarines dove into the dark, carrying nuclear payloads they had hoped would never be used. Hacker cells across the globe were mobilized, told to dig into alien signals, find weaknesses, anything. Engineers dusted off black-budget projects, experimental weapons whispered about in defense circles but never deployed. Everywhere, ordinary men and women armed themselves with whatever they could find. Militias formed in the shadows of skyscrapers. Farmers welded makeshift armor to their tractors. Mechanics stripped cars and buses into barricades. Humanity was preparing not for victory, but for survival. The Council had underestimated them once. Hargrove intended to make sure they never did again. Yet even as preparations surged, the fractures widened. In Geneva, a faction of world leaders convened, furious at Hargrove. They called him a warmonger, a dictator who had spoken for billions without consent. Some whispered about offering his head to the Council as tribute, believing it might appease them. Others plotted behind closed doors, trying to contact the aliens in secret, offering to negotiate separate terms if their nations were spared. The betrayal cut deep. Reports of these secret communications reached Hargrove within hours. He listened in silence, his jaw tightening with every word. "They'll sell us out," Vega muttered bitterly. "The same leaders who've bled our people for profit are ready to bend the knee just to save themselves." Hargrove didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but iron-hard. "Then we remind them what happens to traitors in wartime." On the second night, the Council made its first move without warning. A single warship fired a lance of burning plasma into the Pacific Ocean. The blast vaporized hundreds of square miles of water, creating a wave that swallowed islands whole. Millions watched in horror as their screens showed the devastation. Cities gone, coastlines erased, tens of thousands dead in minutes. The message was clear: kneel or this will be your fate. In shelters and living rooms, families wept. Fear spread like wildfire. And yet, among the ashes, something else rose. Fury. The word no spread faster than ever before. Scrawled on walls, painted on streets, carved into the rubble of broken homes. The Council had shown its teeth, but it had also revealed its arrogance. Instead of breaking Earth, it had given humanity something it hadn't had in centuries: unity and rage. In the bunker, Hargrove stood before the screens showing the devastation. His eyes were red, not with tears, but with fire. "They think fear will break us," he said. "But fear is fuel, and we're about to burn hotter than they can imagine." Vega leaned in. "What's the plan, sir?" Hargrove stared at the war map, at the glowing ships blotting Earth's skies. His voice dropped, steady and lethal. "We don't give them another word. We give them fire." The 72 hours were nearly up. Across Earth, weapons were primed, soldiers braced, civilians armed themselves with whatever they had. Humanity wasn't ready, but they were willing. And sometimes, Hargrove thought grimly, willing was all it took to make gods bleed. The third night came heavy with silence. The Council's deadline ticked down, minute by minute, second by second, a countdown broadcast on every screen like a death clock. Outside, alien warships still hung above Earth's atmosphere, vast and unmoving, blotting out stars in geometric formation. They didn't need to move. Their presence was enough to suffocate hope. In bunkers across the world, soldiers waited. In cities, families clutched each other. Across the seas, submarines crept silently, bristling with warheads designed for enemies of flesh, not titans of steel. In Washington's command bunker, General Hargrove stood in front of the glowing digital wall that mapped the skies. His uniform was creased, his face shadowed, his eyes unblinking. He hadn't slept in days, but neither had the world. Colonel Vega approached, voice low. "Deadline's almost here, sir. What's the order?" Hargrove didn't answer right away. He stared at the ships above, each one capable of glassing entire continents. Humanity had weapons, yes, but they were gnats throwing stones at giants. He knew this. Everyone did. But war wasn't just numbers. War was will. And humanity's will had never been stronger. "Launch!" Hargrove said the word, and the first strike began. It was not meant to win. It was meant to show the Council that humanity would not wait for slaughter. In the Arctic, Missile silos split the frozen earth, sending warheads screaming into the skies. In the Atlantic, submarines unleashed their payloads, streaks of fire cutting across dark water. In the deserts of Nevada, black-budget railguns fired molten metal slugs at velocities no alien sensor expected from a Tier 3 world. The weapons rose like a storm. For one breathless moment, Earth watched its fury fly. The alien ships reacted instantly. Shields flared with colors humanity had no name for. Missiles exploded harmlessly against them. Nuclear fire scattered like sparks against a hurricane. Railgun slugs flattened as though striking invisible walls. Humanity's greatest arsenal, unleashed in fury, barely scratched the paint of the Council's armada. But then something unexpected happened. One submarine's warhead detonated near the atmosphere, not directly against a shield, but close enough to disrupt it. For an instant, a section of alien armor flickered, and in that instant, a railgun slug tore through, punching a hole the size of a bus through the warship's outer hull. The explosion was small compared to the size of the ship, but it was there. And for the first time in recorded history, the Council's warship bled under human fire. The world erupted. Cheers, screams, disbelief. On the streets, people shouted until their voices broke. Soldiers pounded their fists against tables. For one heartbeat, the impossible had been proven. Gods could bleed. The Council's response was merciless. The damaged ship pulled back, but the others unleashed their wrath. Beams of plasma carved through the skies, vaporizing entire battalions in seconds. Cities lit with fire as if the heavens had opened in rage. The Pacific coast burned. Satellites winked out one after another as the sky became a graveyard of shattered metal. Millions died in hours. The death toll rose so fast the numbers lost meaning. Families disappeared in an instant, vaporized where they stood. But still, humanity fought. Jets launched suicide runs. Hackers fed corrupted signals into alien communications, causing minor disruptions. Guerrilla fighters struck at alien landing parties that dared to test Earth's ground resistance. Every act of defiance, however small, carried the same message Hargrove had spoken. No. In the bunker, reports poured in faster than they could be processed. Shanghai lost. Berlin burning. Tokyo gone dark. The words stacked like stones on a grave. Vega slammed his fist on the table. We can't win this, sir. Not like this. We're throwing men into fire. For what? Pride. Hargrove turned slowly, his eyes bloodshot, his voice low. For the right to choose our own chains or none at all. For every child that should grow up free, even if it means dying first. Vega's jaw tightened. And if the cost is all of us? Then we make damn sure they remember who we were before they bury us. The room fell silent. Some officers looked away, unwilling to meet his gaze. Others nodded grimly. Across the world, the fractures deepened. In secret, certain governments attempted to send signals to the Council, offering surrender, promising tribute in exchange for mercy. But the Council didn't answer them. They weren't negotiating anymore. They didn't want obedience. They wanted annihilation. Earth's refusal had insulted them beyond forgiveness. Humanity wasn't just a resource now. It was an example, one that had to be burned so thoroughly that no other subject world would dare say no. On the second day of open war, humanity discovered something else. In South America, a guerrilla strike team ambushed an alien patrol. They expected slaughter. Instead, one of their EMP devices, crude, experimental, human-made, collapsed the shields of a smaller alien craft for several seconds. The fighters swarmed it using explosives, small arms, anything they had. Against all odds, the craft went down, crashing into the jungle. The Council recovered it quickly, but the news spread before they could silence it. Humanity could kill them. Not easily, not cleanly, but it was possible. The effect was electric. Around the world, morale surged. Suddenly, every farmer with a rifle, every mechanic with a wrench, every hacker with a laptop believed they could matter. Humanity wasn't just surviving. They were adapting. And adaptation was humanity's deadliest weapon. In Washington, Hargrove stood over a map littered with red marks representing fallen cities. Vega handed him the latest reports. Losses are catastrophic, sir. Millions dead. But recruitment is up everywhere. Volunteers are flooding in. Men and women who've never held a weapon are begging to fight. Hargrove looked at the board, his face lined with exhaustion, but his voice steady. Good. The council thinks numbers don't matter. They're wrong. They've never fought humanity. They've never fought a species that would rather burn than bow. Vega hesitated. Sir, there's talk of targeting the council's shipyards on the moon. Risky. Nearly suicidal. But if we hit them, Hargrove cut him off. We don't wait. If there's a chance, we take it. Humanity doesn't win by playing safe. We win by hitting where they don't expect. That night, under cover of chaos, the first human strike team was deployed to the moon. Men and women in patched-together suits, carrying stolen tech and human explosives, slipped through gaps in the alien patrols. Their mission was simple: destroy as much as they could before they died. The council never expected it. Explosions rippled across the lunar shipyards. Alien vessels, half-built, were torn apart. Fireballs lit the silent void, visible even from Earth's surface as pinpricks of sudden light. Billions looked up from their ruins and saw the impossible, humanity striking back beyond their own skies. The council roared with fury. Retaliation was swift and merciless. The strike team was obliterated, but their sacrifice lit a fire across Earth that no alien bombardment could extinguish. In the bunker, reports of the moon strike arrived. Officers stared in disbelief, some smiling for the first time in days. Vega let out a rough laugh. They actually did it. Mad bastards pulled it off. Hargrove didn't smile. He only nodded once, slowly. Good. Let the council know this. Earth won't just say no. We'll carve it into their damned skies. By the third night, the war was no longer one-sided. Humanity was still bleeding, still burning, but no longer crawling. Every hour, somewhere on Earth, humans struck back. A shield disrupted. Patrol ambushed. A shipyard sabotaged. Losses were staggering, but resistance grew faster than annihilation. The council was furious. They had expected quick submission or swift extermination. What they got instead was defiance that multiplied with every act of destruction. For the first time in centuries, the council found themselves unsettled. Not because humanity was powerful, but because humanity refused to kneel even when powerless. In the bunker, Hargrove looked over the smoking ruins of Earth through satellite feeds. His voice carried through every channel, every transmission line hacked together across the globe. This is not just survival anymore, he said. This is a reckoning. They came here believing we would kneel. They thought fear would break us. But fear does not break humanity. Fear sharpens us. Fear hardens us. And when fear burns away, only fury remains. He leaned closer to the camera, his face grim, scarred, unyielding. We gave them one word, no. Now we'll give them another. War. Across the burning world, in shattered cities and broken homes, humanity answered him. One word shouted through rubble, scrawled in ash, echoed across radio static. War. The council wanted tribute. Instead, they had awakened the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. A species that refused to kneel. The fourth week of the war was different. The first days had been chaos, panic, the raw terror of prey caught under a predator's shadow. Then came the desperate counterattacks. Costly, reckless, and bloody. But now there was something else in the air. Order. Not the kind of order the council imposed with threats of annihilation, but the kind that came when men and women refused to die quietly. Resistance cells sprang up in every ruined city, every half-buried bunker, every forgotten village. They weren't soldiers, not at first. They were carpenters, teachers, miners, farmers, hackers, factory workers, people who had lost too much to stay still. And everywhere, above it all, one voice bound them together. General Hargrove's broadcasts, patched together from stolen frequencies, scrambled signals, even handwritten leaflets, carried one message. Don't kneel, don't wait, strike. In the command bunker beneath Washington, the maps looked different now. Not just red blots marking destruction, but green sparks scattered across continents. Reports of resistance, sabotage, victories, no matter how small. Colonel Vega leaned over the table, shaking his head in disbelief. Every day we lose cities, sir, but every day we gain fighters. We're not supposed to be standing at all. And yet, he trailed off, a grin tugging at his face. We're not just standing. We're hitting them. Hargrove's expression didn't soften, though his eyes carried a flicker of something dangerous. Pride. That's what they never understood. They've ruled too long. They think survival is about strength. But it's not. It's about adaptation. We've been adapting since we crawled out of the mud. They throw fire at us. We scatter, rebuild, come back sharper. He jabbed a finger at the map. And we keep teaching them the same lesson until it carves itself into their bones. Humanity doesn't break. The Council's fury grew with each passing day. In orbit, their fleets bombarded without pause, erasing districts, vaporizing infrastructure, drowning cities in fire. But the more they burned, the more the ashes became nests for resistance. In Paris, tunnels once used for tourists became networks for fighters. In Cairo, civilians welded ancient weapons onto trucks and turned them into death traps. In Siberia, forests burned, but guerrillas used the smoke to mask ambushes. The Council's soldiers, towering, armored, wielding weapons powered by energies Earth could barely comprehend, expected easy hunts. Instead, they were dragged into a war they had no training for. A squad patrolling the ruins of Mumbai was swallowed by collapsing buildings rigged with human explosives. A convoy in Africa was lured into ravines and buried under rockslides triggered by hidden charges. In New York, entire skyscrapers fell, not from bombardment, but because humans planted charges in their foundations, turning the skyline into weapons. Everywhere the aliens stepped, the Earth itself seemed to spit fire. Reports flowed back to the Council's high chamber, a place where empires had been managed for millennia without serious resistance. The delegates were not accustomed to failure. Their language had no word for stalemate. Humanity is defiance incarnate. One delegate hissed, their voice like scraping metal. They fight even when their deaths are certain. Worse, they infect others. Even now, whispers spread in other subject worlds. They say, if Earth can resist, why not them? The chamber seethed. Their pride was wounded, but worse, fear was coiling through their ranks. They had expected compliance, then extermination. Instead, they had sown the seeds of rebellion across the galaxy. The decision was unanimous. Humanity had to be not only crushed but erased, not just in body but in spirit. No survivors, no legends. But that was already too late. The legend had already been born. On Earth, the cost was unbearable. Entire families were wiped out. Nations fractured beyond recognition. Food shortages swept continents. Disease followed in the wake of devastation. And still, humanity fought. A young fighter named Daniel was only 19 when his family's home in Buenos Aires was vaporized. He picked up a rifle from the ruins and never set it down. His squad ambushed alien patrols in the broken streets, striking, then vanishing. He knew he wouldn't live long. None of them did. But every kill was a piece of vengeance. Every strike, a message, we're still here. In Moscow, an old engineer named Petro scavenged alien wreckage, working sleepless nights in frozen tunnels. He discovered that certain alloys cracked under extreme cold. Soon his people were luring Council troops into blizzards, their armor stiffening until human bullets could pierce it. In Nairobi, a group of hackers hijacked a Council drone, turned it against its masters, and broadcast the footage across the world. For the first time, humanity watched an alien warship destroyed not by nuclear fire, but by its own machine. These stories spread faster than fire. They gave the broken something stronger than hope, purpose. In the bunker, Vega slammed a report onto the table. Look at this, sir. Civilian groups hitting convoys in 30 countries. Farmers building traps that actually work. Kids outsmarting alien patrols. It's madness. It's working. Hargrove leaned forward, studying the reports. His face remained grim, but his voice carried that dangerous undercurrent again. They're learning fast, faster than the Council can adapt. That's what makes us lethal. We take pain and turn it into weapons. He looked around the room, his officers exhausted, hollow-eyed, but listening. Every man, every woman, every child that fights is teaching the council something they've never understood. That freedom doesn't live in palaces or fleets. It lives in the dirt, in the blood, in the fire of people who would rather die than kneel. The council escalated. Entire regions were targeted for annihilation, not because they held strategic value, but because they dared to resist. South America burned under plasma fire. The Middle East was glassed until nothing but black rock remained. Australia vanished under a barrage that turned deserts into molten seas. The death toll soared past 100 million. But even in annihilation, resistance continued. Survivors crawled out of wreckage and fought with knives, with rocks, with their bare hands if nothing else. Children carried messages through sewers. Old men planted mines under rubble. The more the council destroyed, the more enemies it created. By the second month, Earth was no longer fighting to survive. Earth was fighting to win. Hargrove convened his officers. We can't match their fleets, not yet. But we don't need to. We bleed them. Every patrol, every convoy, every landing party, they pay in blood. We turn this planet into a graveyard so thick they'll choke on it. Vega frowned. And after that? Even if we drive them off, what then? We're broken, sir. Billions gone. Infrastructure gone. Earth will be a husk. Hargrove's voice was like iron. Better a husk than a slave camp. We rebuild. We always rebuild. Humanity's strength isn't in its cities. It's in its will. Then came the turning point. In Brazil, scavengers uncovered an alien core from a downed ship. Petro, the old engineer from Moscow, studied it. What he found changed everything. The core contained data, coordinates, fleet patterns, weaknesses. It wasn't much, but it was enough to prove that the council wasn't untouchable. When the data reached Hargrove, he stared at it in silence for a long time. Then he spoke. This isn't just survival anymore. This is war on their terms. Vega raised an eyebrow. You mean to take it to them? Hargrove nodded slowly. We've shown the galaxy we can bleed them. Now we show the galaxy we can break them. Across the stars, the council still believed Earth was a dying ember. They didn't yet see what was coming, because humanity had already chosen its path. It wasn't tribute. It wasn't surrender. It wasn't even survival. It was war. And the longer the council kept their boots on Earth's throat, the sharper Earth's teeth became. The 5th month of the war began with silence. Not peace, never peace, but the heavy silence of a predator stalking prey. The council had pulled back its fleets, regrouping after weeks of unexpected resistance. To most civilians, it felt like a reprieve. Fires stopped raining from the sky. Bombardments slowed. Patrols grew less frequent. But General Hargrove knew better. Predators didn't hesitate out of mercy. They hesitated to strike harder. In the Washington bunker, he studied the data pulled from the alien core scavenged in Brazil. Engineers, scientists, and hackers had worked around the clock to decode it. The result was laid out in front of him. Coordinates, supply lines, weak points in the council's fleets. Colonel Vega leaned on the table beside him. It's not much, sir. The data's patchy, corrupted in places. But this could get us in the fight for real. Hargrove's scarred hand hovered over the glowing screen. He saw one cluster of coordinates marked in the decoded data. Not a fleet. Not a fortress. Something else. Shipyard, Hargrove said. Vega nodded grimly. Council logistics hub just outside Mars. They're using it to repair the ships we've been hitting. If we could. He trailed off, shaking his head. Sir, we don't have the capacity. Not yet. Our fleets are scrap. Our shuttles are death traps. Hargrove's jaw clenched. Then we build something that isn't. It started in the ruins of factories, in hidden bunkers, in shipyards that had been little more than museums before the war. Humanity began constructing vessels that shouldn't have existed yet. They were ugly, improvised, stitched together from alien wreckage and human ingenuity. Old rockets with alien cores welded in. Shuttles armed with railguns stripped from tanks. Submarines converted into spacefaring coffins. The council had ships that looked like works of art. Sleek, polished, flawless. Humanity's ships looked like nightmares. But nightmares could kill. Petro, the old engineer, oversaw much of the work in secret hangars under Siberia. His voice rasped over comms to Hargrove. "They're ugly, General. Ugly like war itself. But they'll fly. And if they fly, they'll fight." Hargrove allowed the faintest curl of a smile. "Ugly is fine. Ugly is honest." The plan was suicide. Every officer knew it. Strike the shipyard near Mars. Cripple their repairs. Send a message to the galaxy. Hargrove gathered the strike force. Volunteers only, pilots, engineers, Marines. Every man and woman chosen knew they weren't coming back. That wasn't the point. In the hangar, the ships loomed like stitched beasts. Hargrove addressed them not with ceremony, but with the blunt force of truth. "You all know what this is. You're not coming home. Don't lie to yourselves. But when history remembers this day, and it won't remember you as dead men. It'll remember you as the first bastards who took the war off Earth's soil and shoved it down the council's throat." His voice dropped, sharp as steel. "You're not dying for survival. You're dying for victory." The strike launched under the cover of debris fields. Alien wreckage littered Earth's orbit, and hidden among it, the human fleet clawed its way into space. Engines coughed and roared. Shields flickered, but they moved. Against all odds, they moved. The approach to Mars was a gauntlet. Council patrols swept the skies, hunting for survivors. But humanity had learned. They used radio silence, cloaking fields patched from alien tech, even the shadows of asteroids. For every ship that was lost, two slipped through unseen. When the shipyard came into view, even the veterans drew sharp breaths. It wasn't a station. It was a fortress, a floating city of metal and light. Vessels the size of mountains hung docked, their scars being welded shut by swarms of drones. Supplies flowed like rivers between platforms. Colonel Vega's voice came through the comms, grim and steady. "All ships, you know the plan. Hit hard. Hit fast. Don't stop until you're nothing but fire." The human fleet roared into life. The first wave was chaos. Missiles streaked out. Railguns thundered. Improvised plasma cannons spat unstable fire. Explosions lit the void as drones were shredded. Platforms cracked. Smaller ships tore apart. The council's defenses screamed awake. Shields flaring, turrets locking on. Human ships died by the dozen. Fireballs lit the blackness. Pilots' screams cut off mid-sentence. But they didn't stop. A converted shuttle plowed itself straight into a supply line, detonating in a firestorm that tore half the dock apart. A submarine turn vessel fired its last torpedoes before ramming a repair drone swarm, scattering burning wreckage across the station. Fighters with wings stitched from scrap danced suicide runs, taking out turrets one by one. For every human life lost, something broke. Something burned. Something died. And in the chaos, one ship, the ugliest of them all, Petro's creation, slammed into the central power hub of the shipyard. It tore through like a spear through flesh. The explosion was so bright it turned night into day on Earth's surface. The shipyard buckled. Lights across its skeleton flickered and died. Dozens of docked warships, half-finished, were ripped apart in the chain reaction. The Council had lost something it hadn't in centuries. A fortress. The cost was unbearable. Of the human strike force, fewer than 10 ships limped back. Vega's vessel was torn apart in orbit. His last words a guttural laugh. "Tell the bastards I said hello." But the survivors returned with proof. Proof that humanity could not only fight, but win. When the footage spread, Earth erupted. Cities and ruins cheered until their voices cracked. Survivors painted new banners. Not with no, but with war. The message was clear. Humanity was not prey. Humanity was predator. Now, in the council chamber, the fury was volcanic. Delegates shrieked, demanded annihilation, cursed Earth as vermin. But beneath the rage was something worse. Unease. If a Tier 3 world could destroy a shipyard, what else could they do? How many others would follow their example? Already, whispers stirred across the galaxy. On distant subject worlds, slaves murmured the word that had burned the council's pride. No. On Earth, Hargrove stood before the survivors in the bunker. His face was carved with grief. Vega's loss weighed on him, as did the deaths of thousands who had flown to their doom. But his voice was steady, relentless. They thought this war would end in weeks. They thought we'd bow or burn. Instead, we've shown them something they've never seen: fear. He leaned over the table, eyes burning with iron will. We're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting for the galaxy. Because if we can defy them, others will too. And when that happens, the Council won't just lose Earth, they'll lose everything. The room was silent. Officers stared at him, some in awe, some in terror, all knowing the truth. This wasn't about Earth anymore. This was about war without end. The aftermath of Mars hung heavy in every corner of the galaxy. On Earth, survivors painted the sky with firecrackers salvaged from ruined stockpiles. They laughed, they wept, they screamed into the heavens. Against all odds, humanity had struck the unstrikable. For the first time since the war began, people believed they might live to see another dawn. But in the council chambers, there was no celebration, only fury. The delegates roared like storms, their voices echoing across halls older than humanity itself. The word no had become a curse in their language, spat like venom. The destruction of the Mars shipyard was not just a tactical loss. It was a wound to their pride, their legend, their illusion of invincibility. The council voted without dissent. Humanity was not to be pacified. Humanity was to be eradicated. The retaliation began without warning. At dawn, fleets twice the size of the first wave descended upon Earth. Warships blotted out the sky in formations so vast they looked like oceans of steel. Their weapons burned brighter, hotter, deadlier. Cities that had survived the first months were erased in seconds. Mountain ranges split apart. Oceans boiled where beams lanced through them. It wasn't war anymore. It was execution. Hargrove stood in the command bunker, watching live feeds as entire continents went dark. His jaw was iron, but his eyes betrayed the weight pressing against his chest. His officers spoke in clipped voices, reports stacking faster than they could process. Chicago gone, Delhi erased, Cairo offline, half of Europe burning. Colonel Vega was dead, but his absence was still felt like a wound. His replacement, a younger man named Ramirez, turned to Hargrove with wide, terrified eyes. "Sir, we're losing everything. At this rate, there won't be an Earth to defend." Hargrove's fists clenched. "Then we make damn sure there's no council left to celebrate it." The Mars strike had given humanity confidence, but it had also revealed something. Fragments of alien cores could be weaponized. Petro, the old engineer, had been working in silence with a team of scientists deep beneath the Siberian mountains. What they were building wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a monster. They called it Project Black Sun, a hybrid device, part human nuclear science, part alien core instability, part madness. If detonated in orbit, it wouldn't just destroy a fleet. It would collapse space around it, tearing ships apart like paper in a storm. But the cost was unimaginable. They couldn't control the chain reaction. A single black sun could wipe out entire fleets, or half of Earth along with them. When Petro explained it to Hargrove, his voice shook. Not from fear, but from exhaustion. "It's a blade too sharp to wield, General. You swing it once, maybe twice, before it cuts the hand that holds it." Hargrove didn't hesitate. "Then we swing it now, because if we don't, there won't be a hand left to cut." The Council fleet moved systematically, grinding Earth into dust. Entire regions became wastelands of glass and ash. Yet resistance didn't stop. Guerrillas in the ruins struck at alien patrols. Civilians armed with nothing but rifles ambushed squads of soldiers. Hackers sent viruses into Council communications, filling their networks with a single word. No, it wasn't enough. The Council pressed harder, sensing victory. Their commanders boasted that humanity would be erased within weeks. And then the sky lit with fire. The first black sun was deployed above Africa, hidden among debris fields. A converted shuttle carried the weapon into orbit. Its pilot, a man named Harris, knew he would never return. His last words, broadcast to every open frequency, were raw and simple. "This is for all of us. Light them up." The black sun detonated. Space itself seemed to scream. The explosion wasn't fire, it was distortion. Reality twisting and tearing. Council warships caught in the blast ripped apart in silence, their shields collapsing, their hulls folding in on themselves before vanishing into nothingness. Dozens of ships, giants that had towered above Earth, were erased in seconds. For one moment, Earth's skies were clear. The world roared. In bunkers, in ruins, in shelters, humanity screamed in triumph. They had done the impossible again. But the cost was brutal. The distortion ripped into Earth's atmosphere, spawning storms, earthquakes, and tidal waves that crushed thousands more lives. Hargrove stood over the reports, his face like stone. Ramirez spat. "We can't keep doing this. We're killing ourselves just as fast as we're killing them." Hargrove's voice was cold. "Better to die on our feet than on our knees." The council was shaken. Their fleets had suffered a blow they couldn't dismiss. Delegates screamed for escalation, for bringing in weapons long forbidden even among their kind. But beneath the rage was fear. They had unleashed everything on Earth: fire, fleets, annihilation. Yet the humans still fought, still bled them, still found ways to twist weakness into strength. What terrified them most wasn't the black sun. It was what the black sun represented, that humanity was willing to burn the galaxy itself if it meant not kneeling. As weeks passed, more black suns were built. Each one a gamble. Each one deployed only when defeat seemed certain. They tore through fleets, but every detonation crippled Earth further. Skies burned red. Storms raged endlessly. The Council's ships came without warning. They didn't hover like visitors. They loomed like executioners. Black vessels, scarred with alien sigils, hung above Earth's skies, blocking the sun in some regions and casting whole cities into the kind of shadow that made people whisper prayers they hadn't said in years. The news anchors trembled as they read from the scripts the invaders handed them. By decree of the Galactic Council, Earth had been classified as a Tier 3 subject world. A tribute order had been issued. Compliance was mandatory. What they demanded was simple on paper. Every year, Earth would provide ships full of, or technology, food, and even workers. Failure meant annihilation. Humanity wasn't the first to face such an ultimatum. Other species had been broken before. Some bent the knee. Others were erased, their stars burning with the ashes of rebellion. The Council expected obedience. They expected fear. They expected Earth to lower its head like the rest. General Alden Hargrove wasn't built for obedience. He had spent decades in the military, a man hardened by war zones long before humanity ever looked beyond its own planet. His hair was iron gray, his face marked by scars that told their own story. When the Council's order flashed across the military command centers, Hargrove stood silent, his fists curling until his knuckles whitened. His second in command, Colonel Vega, muttered, "Sir, if we refuse, we risk extermination. We're not ready for interstellar war." Hargrove's eyes stayed locked on the glowing words of the alien decree. Subject world. Tribute. He felt the weight of every insult those words carried. They didn't see humanity as equals, not as rivals, not even as enemies. Just livestock, tools, slaves. "I didn't bury half my generation," Hargrove said slowly, his voice like gravel scraping metal. "Just to hand the rest over like cattle." Vega swallowed hard. "Then what do we tell them?" The Council's representatives arrived in orbit, demanding Earth's official answer. Across the globe, leaders debated endlessly. Politicians choking on fear, corporations calculating profit, religious leaders calling it Judgment Day. But the Council had given a deadline, and it was running out. In the end, it wasn't the President, the UN, or the CEOs who made the decision. It was Hargrove and the men like him, men who had fought and bled, who understood that sometimes survival demanded more than submission. It demanded fury. When the time came, the Council's holographic envoy projected itself above Earth's capital. Its form was a mass of shifting tendrils, a shape not meant for human eyes, but the voice was perfectly clear. Speak your answer. Will you pay tribute as all lesser worlds must? Billions watched, on screens, in streets, in bunkers. Hargrove stepped forward. His boots echoed like thunder in the silence. Every camera, every eye, every trembling heart was fixed on him. He didn't give a speech. He didn't waste words on explanations or negotiations. Humanity didn't have the luxury for politics. He gave them one word. No. The envoy twitched, its alien body spasming as though struck. The word spread like wildfire, carried through every broadcast, every radio, every digital line. No. The silence that followed was heavier than any weapon. For a heartbeat, even the council's ships seemed to hesitate. Then came the sound, not of war, not yet, but of a billion voices erupting from Earth. Some in terror, some in rage, some in a kind of pride they had forgotten they possessed. The council had expected compliance. They had not expected defiance. Not from a Tier 3 subject world, not from creatures they considered beneath notice. In their arrogance, they had forgotten one truth. Humanity had never known how to kneel, and with one word, Earth had just declared war. Never again will they call themselves gods. His voice rose, thunder rolling through static. If we burn, they burn with us. And when the stars remember us, they will remember one truth. Humanity doesn't kneel. The cheers were weak, broken by hunger and grief, but they were real. The journey began. Deliverance slipped past Earth's orbit, hidden in the fields of wreckage. The crew spoke little. They knew they weren't coming back. Instead, they carved names into the steel walls, the names of everyone they'd lost. Families, friends, cities, even pets. The walls became a graveyard of memory, carried into the stars. Hargrove sat in the command chair, his hands steady on the controls. Ramirez stood at his side, his protests silenced by duty. Petro worked feverishly in the reactor chamber, coaxing the unstable core to life. For weeks, they drifted through asteroid belts, through voids of silence. Council patrols loomed, but they passed unseen, their cloaking fields holding. Every day, the crew whispered the same mantra, never again. Then one night, in the black, the council capital system appeared. It was a jewel of light, a world wrapped in shining cities, fleets orbiting like a crown. The council's pride, their power, their throne. Hargrove stared at it through the viewport, his face unreadable. For the first time in months, Ramirez broke the silence. It's beautiful. Hargrove's voice was quiet, but hard. So was Earth. The alarm screamed as council patrols detected them. Fighters surged from the fleets, sleek and endless, weapons blazing. Deliverance roared forward, its patchwork guns spitting fire. Human fighters launched in desperate waves, holding back the enemy for precious seconds. One by one, they were torn apart, their deaths lighting the void. The ship shook under bombardment. Consoles exploded. Men and women screamed as hull breaches tore through the decks. Petro's voice crackled through the comms. Frantic. The core is unstable. We need to detonate now or we'll lose it. Hargrove gritted his teeth. Not yet. Closer. Deliverance plunged through the fleets, fire ripping across its hull. Fighters rammed alien ships in suicide strikes. Crewmen threw themselves into breaches, sealing them with their own bodies. Every second bought was paid in blood. At last, the capital world loomed before them, untouched by war for millennia. Hargrove's voice was a whisper. Now. In the reactor chamber, Petro's old hands moved with final precision. He initiated the sequence, his eyes wet, his lips trembling as he whispered a prayer. The core screamed, light spilling like a newborn sun. Alarms rose to a shriek. Ramirez shouted, "Core overload in 10 seconds." Hargrove stood from his chair, looking out at the council's throne world. His face was calm, carved from iron. He spoke one last time, knowing the galaxy might hear him. "You should have left us alone." Then the world lit with something worse than fire. Space itself tore open. Light twisted. Stars bent. Fleets shattered like glass. The Council's capital world was swallowed in silence, its shining cities folding into the void. Thousands of ships burned, then vanished. The core collapsed, and with it the heart of an empire. Deliverance was gone. Hargrove was gone. Petro, Ramirez, the crew gone. But so was the Council. On Earth, survivors watched in stunned silence. Then slowly realization spread. Cheers erupted through the ruins, mixed with sobs of grief. Humanity had done the impossible. They had killed gods. But the victory was not clean. The detonation rippled across space, tearing at the fabric of the galaxy. Wormholes opened. Storms raged. The Council was gone, but the galaxy itself shuddered at the cost. Humanity had won. But what kind of world would they inherit? The war was over. The Council was gone. Its fleets shattered, its throne world swallowed. The empire that had ruled the stars for millennia had been annihilated in a single act of defiance. But the victory tasted like ash. Earth was no longer a blue jewel. From orbit it looked wounded, scarred, a planet limping on the edge of collapse. Oceans boiled with strange currents. Skies were stained red with storms that never ceased. Cities were hollow skeletons of glass and rubble. Billions were dead. Whole nations erased. Forests gone. Rivers poisoned. Farmland turned to wasteland. The survivors numbered only in the millions, scattered across bunkers, ruins, caves, and shelters. Yet they were alive. And in that survival there was something terrible and unyielding. Pride. Ramirez had not died on deliverance. He had been thrown clear in a crippled fighter before the Black Sun detonated. His escape pod drifting back to Earth weeks later. He carried Hargrove's last orders like scripture burned into his mind. Now he stood where the White House had once been, nothing but shattered marble around him, addressing the survivors through cracked transmitters. "The general is gone," Ramirez said, his voice steady despite the hunger and grief in his eyes. "But his word remains. He told us to make damn sure the galaxy remembers, and we will." He held up a battered rifle, the same kind carried by farmers and children alike during the war. "We were nothing, a Tier 3 world. Livestock, they called us. And now, the gods themselves are gone." He paused, looking out over the broken world. "And we're still here. Humanity stands." The crowd, thin and ragged, raised their fists. Some wept, some shouted. The word rose from their throats like thunder. Never. Petro had not survived. His bones lay in orbit, consumed by the Black Sun. But his work lived on. Engineers scavenged his designs, his notes, his theories, scratching them into walls, memorizing them like prayers. Humanity had inherited weapons it barely understood, dangerous tools that could break the galaxy itself if used again. The question haunted Ramirez and the council of survivors that now led Earth. Would they wield them again, or bury them in fear of what they had done? No answer came, only silence broken by storms. But the galaxy was listening. When the council died, their subjects watched in shock. On slave worlds, collars were cut. On conquered planets, chains were thrown into fire. The empire had fallen, and with it the illusion of invincibility. Whispers spread faster than fleets. It was Earth. It was humanity. They killed the council. Some called them saviors. Others called them monsters. A species that had destroyed gods could not be trusted. Fear mingled with awe, awe with hatred, but no one doubted the truth. Humanity had rewritten the order of the galaxy. On Earth, Ramirez walked through ruins every day. He saw children playing in the skeletons of skyscrapers, their laughter thin but real. He saw men and women planting crops in poisoned soil, refusing to starve. He saw survivors carving Hargrove's name into stone, into steel, into memory. The general had become more than a man. He had become a legend, the one who had said no, the one who had carried humanity's rage into the stars. His statue stood not in marble, but in rubble, a simple pile of stones with his name scratched across them. Survivors left offerings there: helmets, rifles, scraps of uniforms, and above it they scrawled the words, "Humanity kneels to none." But the cost weighed heavily. Ramirez met with scientists who warned him of the damage. The black sun had torn holes in space, wounds that bled storms and radiation. Travel across the stars was unstable. Wormholes opened and closed unpredictably. Trade, communication, exploration all shattered. The galaxy was broken and Earth had broken it. Ramirez stared at the reports, his heart heavy. "We saved ourselves by damning everyone else." An old woman, one of the few surviving teachers, sat across from him. Her voice was quiet, her face lined with grief. Better a damned galaxy than a silent Earth. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, painfully, life clawed its way back. Crops were coaxed from poisoned ground. Water was filtered from ash. Machines were rebuilt. Homes were patched together from wreckage. Humanity had lived through hell, and now it lived in the ruins. But there was no despair, only grim determination. Ramirez spoke to the survivors one night, gathered in the ruins of a stadium. His voice carried through broken speakers. "They thought we would die. They thought we would kneel. We proved them wrong." He paused, scanning the crowd. "But remember this, we are not gods. We are not saviors. We are survivors, and survivors rebuild." His fist clenched and lifted high. "We'll rebuild Earth, and when the galaxy looks at us, they won't see slaves. They'll see the species that killed gods." The roar shook the ruins. Far beyond Earth, in the scattered colonies of the former council, new empires began to rise. Some sought alliance with Earth to learn from the defiant world that had shattered chains. Others swore to destroy it, fearing what humanity might become. Ramirez knew war would come again. Maybe tomorrow, maybe 100 years from now. Humanity's victory had not earned safety. It had earned enemies, but it had also earned respect. One night, alone in the ruins of Washington, Ramirez climbed to where Hargrove's command bunker had once stood. He stared at the storm-filled sky and spoke softly, as though the general could hear him. "We did it, sir. We burned them down. But I don't know if we saved ourselves or doomed everyone else." The wind howled through broken buildings, carrying dust and ash. Ramirez closed his eyes. In the silence, he could almost hear Hargrove's gravel voice. "Better damned than chained." Ramirez exhaled and whispered back, "Better damned than chained." Years later, children sat in the ruins and listened to stories told by scarred veterans. Stories of the day humanity said no. Stories of the black sun, of deliverance, of the general who never bowed. The children would ask if the council would return, and the veterans would shake their heads. "No, kid. The council's gone. Humanity killed them." The children would stare wide-eyed. "Then who rules the stars now?" The veterans would smile, grim and tired. "No one. And maybe that's the way it should be." But the truth was darker. Holes still tore through the galaxy. Wormholes raged unpredictably. Fleets vanished in storms. Stars flickered unnaturally. Humanity had killed its masters, but in doing so, it had scarred the universe itself. Perhaps one day something would crawl through those wounds, something worse than the council. And if it did, the galaxy would remember one thing. When Earth was told to kneel, it looked gods in the eye, bared its teeth, and said, "No." And so the saga of humanity ended not with peace or prosperity, but with survival and defiance. A shattered Earth, a broken galaxy, and a legacy carved in blood and fire.